Hinata Hyūga. Now, I do intend to at some point destroy all my credibility and do a podcast on my waifus. It's if we're gonna do that though, Hinata would probably be number one or number two. Part of the problem is just some of the waifus I had are from way back in the day, and it wasn't creepy when they were initially my waifus, but it's kind of creepy now because I've gotten older. They still kind of embody a lot of things I like in a woman, but it's just kind of awkward. Anyways, so Hinata Hyūga. She's been probably one of my longest term waifus. And I guess let's just say what a waifu is. I kind of use the term ironically, at least somewhat so. Initially, what a waifu is basically it's a character, because characters are real in a sense that they kind of represent certain ideals. They often embody a certain degree of an ideal, as indeed people embody certain degrees of ideals. Um, and a waifu is basically a character who embodies most of the feminine traits that you admire and that you'd want in a woman. Archbishop Cardinal Archbishop Fulton Sheen talked about this a great deal in his lecture, which, if I remember, I'll post a link to it. The Virgin Mary, the woman that I love, where he says that it is the nature of men, that is males, to love an idea before they love a person. He was saying like that he knew people who had pictures of the kind of women like pictures that weren't of a particular women, and they'd have them in their office or whatever, and they'd wind up marrying a woman like that. He said it's very often that men will have an idea of a woman, and when they finally meet the woman, they will just it'll just all click together. That tends to be how men think often is through idealized images. And to a certain extent, that's kind of what a waifu is. At least initially, a waifu was just a female character that you really liked because they were kind of a representation, and representations are important because it's hard to think in complete abstractions. That's why we have things like personifications. That's why like there's Lady Britannia, there's Lady Liberty, who are both kind of waifus. Um, that's why we have John Bull. That's why we have Mother Russia. That's why we have all these kind of embodiments because abstract principles are difficult. So a waifu was basically a character who kind of represented the ideas that you would want in a wife, because waifu just means wife basically. Over time, what it kind of grew into was it was combined with autism, and it became people would go beyond that. And keep in mind, waifus aren't anything new. You think waifus are like brand like something new? Go and look at a Shakespeare play sometime. Those are full of waifus, and from everything I've read, they regarded that way as such. French courtly literature is always about like portraying women as being these beautiful, pure creatures, and etc. The Japanese did that. The Chinese do that. The Indians have that. In the Mahabharata, we have Draupadi, who's kind of a waifu, although that involves polyamory, which is degeneracy. But you get my point. It's not like something that was just invented in the last 30 years. This is just something men have always had. Particularly, like even during the 19th century, you had like Little Women and stuff, and that was fairly popular among men. Because what's her name? Joan. I forget. Someone's gonna put it in the kind of the nerdy one. She was like a super waifu, and a lot of men liked her. So that's kind of initially what it was, which is kind of a healthy, normal thing. It's perfectly normal for people to be attracted to fictional characters. In fact, I think fiction is very useful because it helps us to kind of understand ourselves, what we kind of believe in, and kind of reconcile ourselves with the world. Um, but it kind of over time got mixed with autism. We have the phenomena of people in Japan who have like body pillows, who like believe that they're married to fictional characters, and it's like they'll take like a doll of a female character they like, and like do stuff with it, like have birthday parties with it and stuff like that. And that's just kind of autism. I think most people have waifus. I think even people who say anime is ana gay still have waifus. So Hinata is pretty close to my perfect waifu. First off, her physical appearance. Hinata is exceedingly beautiful. I'd say she's probably the most beautiful girl in Naruto and probably one of the most beautiful in all of anime. I personally love long black hair. Her hair is, I guess, technically purple, but it's close enough to being black. I do like kind of the Hime haircut. Maybe that makes me a weeb. I don't know. Uh, Generally speaking, what I like, my ideal woman is pale, smooth skin, long black hair, and blue eyes. And that's kind of what I like. And while Hinata has violet eyes, that's kind of close enough. They're kind of a light color. So I do find her very beautiful. She's also kind of more feminine looking than some of the others. She has much broader hips and she has much larger breasts, which I like, and I think it fits her better. But really, what more than that, she just has a very, very strong aristocratic grace to her. Hinata is, of course, from the Hyūga family, which is kind of the noble family, the most aristocratic family in Konoha. They're a large family. There's a lot of them. They're wealthy. They have their own estate. They have the Bakugan, which allows them to see through walls. They have their own kind of style. And Hinata was raised as basically a classic lady. She was brought up to do kind of lady things, tea ceremonies, poetry. Her hobby is flower pressing, um, sewing. Just kind of traditional feminine activities, and it shows. She has an incredibly shy demeanor, partially just because the harshness of her house, but it really comes from is a very very big heart, a deep compassion for everyone, a willingness to fight if it's possible, but a more belief of just wanting peace. She has a very kind of that traditional feminine submissive servant nature. She deeply enjoys cooking, for instance. Cooking for people she cares about and just kind of fussing over them and making sure that others are happy is kind of, I think, one of the primary things men want in a woman. What a man needs in a woman is support. The male force is the creative and the destructive force. The female force is the nurturing and sustaining force. And Hinata, as I said, has a very nurturing appearance. To a certain extent, that's why men like large breasts, because they psychologically convey the idea of motherliness, of nurturing. And it's something men are attracted to physically and spiritually. And she has that in her nature. She's very gentle, she's very polite, very kind. She doesn't hit people, she doesn't scream at people, she doesn't insult them. She's kind of shy, and she's kind of submissive to her husband. And those are all kind of things that are incredibly attractive to men, particularly kind of traditional men. She is basically a lady who also happens to be a ninja. I don't think Hinata really wants to be a ninja, though. She seems happiest when she gives up being a ninja and basically becomes a housewife. Um, because she's a traditional woman. She views supporting the man that she loves and the man that she idealizes, and having children, that is creating new life with him and nurturing that life, as being her role, as being the greatest thing she could do. I think there's a tendency to dismiss motherhood as being a baby factory, and I think nothing could be further from the truth. Women possess the ability to create new humans in them. They can do something that only God can do. Um, a man lays his seed inside of a woman, and she can grow a complete human being, and it comes out 9 months later, and it's a miracle. It really is. It's one of the kind of the most beautiful things I can think of. The ability of women to do that, and also the ability of women to nurture the child. Um, the feminine influence that makes the child grow its own personality. The ability to kind of raise the child. The father is there to, as I said, to be the creating and destroying force. He's there to introduce the child to adulthood. He's there to kind of do the hard things, like teach the child the hard lessons, to discipline the child, etc. To be a somewhat aloof kind of idealized figure that the kid looks up to. The mother is there to have an unconditional force of love. In traditional societies, the women more or less rule at home, and their C.S. Lewis put it, their purpose is to regulate inside the household, while the husband has dominion outside of it. And women rule not by bitching, not by abusing their husbands, not by manipulating them, but they rule because their man loves them and is willing to fight and die for them. I mean, it's people will say in like patriarchal societies, oh, women were oppressed, but men would duel each other to the death to defend a woman's honor. Like and Naruto's. And why am I bringing this all up? Because Naruto's kind of like this, and I'm trying to explain kind of why Hinata is such a waifu for a lot of people. Because all the kind of things I'm saying about traditional womanhood and traditional masculinity are kind of embodied in her. Naruto's not the biggest manly man, but he does have a lot of kind of positive masculine things. The ability, the willingness to use your own hands to protect what's yours. Naruto wishes to have a family. Like, I mean, Naruto, as much of a kind of a doofus as he is, he has very kind of traditional manly goals. He wants to be a strong fighter. He wants to be a leader. He wants to marry a beautiful woman, have children with them, and pass on his legacy to them. Which is more or less what was kind of the norm that most human beings who weren't clergy aspired to in most of human history. So Naruto is kind of unexpectedly very right wing in a lot of ways. And I think Hinata is a good example of that. Because ultimately, Naruto, unlike most anime, chooses kind of the more feminine, the prettier, and the more loving woman over the less loving one. But no, in patriarchal societies, men will fight. Like, if someone called Hinata a whore, Naruto would probably kill the guy, or beat the living shit out of him. So you can say that that patriarchal societies are negative to women, but if someone fucks with your wife or your sister or your fiance or your daughter in a patriarchal society, you kill that guy. You fuck him up. Andrew Jackson, when people insulted his wife, he fucking killed them in duels. So, and men don't do that because their wife manipulates them or controls them. They do that because they love her. They obey her out of love. They obey her because she's what completes them. Uh, in an ideal marriage, the woman is the other half of their soul, and maybe this is like that, but that's kind of the purpose of things like waifus and things like anime, is to teach us about those ideals and so that we can strive towards them in our real lives. So maybe that's a little deep, but and maybe I didn't say too much about the show, but I think if you think about it, most of what I said kind of applies to her and to kind of the concept in general. It's kind of my explaining why Hinata's so high on my waifu and kind of what the concept of it is in general. And maybe just talk a bit because she is such a perfect exemplar of femininity. What is the feminine and what about the feminine attracts men? So I hope you enjoyed the video. This is Argent signing out.